Hello, welcome to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome to another Monday edition of the show. I am your host today, Jeffrey Bazzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, first and foremost, happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jeffrey.
How does it feel to be 22?
Well, it doesn't really feel much different than 21. I mean, we got Aaron Hicks and Franchy Cordero at the corners tonight in the outfield for the Yanks. So I can't even really enjoy my birthday because they're playing Aaron Hicks, who I would say is the player that I despise the most on the Yankees right now. And I don't know if you saw it too. Aaron Hicks also made a public comment that he doesn't really know what his role is. Your role is to sit on the pine, pal. You stink. That's what your role is. That was exciting to wake up to, but I guess I'm not really sure of Franchy Cordero's role on the team either, but I've seen him play for the Red Sox and it wasn't great. So I guess because I don't know, that just annoys me. I don't know, especially this early in the season. I get you're trying to get guys reps, but also we could just kind of talk about it. The Yankees are playing your Phillies tonight, and we're going to get into the matchup really a little bit later into the show. But I think it's worth noting that it is early in the season and guys are still rested and healthy. It's not like they went through that brutal of a spring training. You have off a lot of days in spring training. So I don't really see need a reason or need to hear a reason as to why Aaron Hicks and Franchy Cordero were in the lineup. But I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, and the same goes for the Phillies. I mean, we had three players in the WBC, the World Baseball Classic, Turner, Schwarber, and Realmuto, and they've played every game so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's only the fourth game of the season, and Boone's already sitting guys. But we know he doesn't really make the lineup. We know it's probably Brian Cashman. So that's neither here nor there. We'll get into more baseball talk later. But I want to start off with the Final Four. Obviously, that was Saturday. And I thought the first game between Florida Atlantic and San Diego State was the much better matchup. And obviously, you don't need me to tell you that. But I mean, let's talk about that game because it was a very up and down game, and it was a game where FAU was winning for the majority of it.
Yeah, I thought throughout at least the first half, they were kind of in control. They were just making their shots, and they were kind of picking apart the San Diego State defense, which is kind of their thing that they hang their hat on, their defensive play. But FAU, it was just crazy to see them down the stretch. There was that stretch, I thought, in the last few minutes where neither team could really make a bucket, but I thought Florida Atlantic still had the upper hand because every time San Diego State countered early in the second half, FAU would counter right back. And it was just kind of starting to see FAU just go completely ice cold. I mean, they couldn't really buy one. And also, another thing I noticed too, Jimmy, was they had trouble on the boards in the second half. They were giving San Diego State a lot of extra possessions. And I think ultimately that's kind of why San Diego State clawed back in the game. They were getting some extra possessions and then they made timely buckets. And obviously the most notable one was the buzzer beater from Butler, I think is his last name, right? I don't know his first name, so forgive me for not knowing his first name. But
and that shot did not even look like. I mean, that offensive possession in general was kind of a mess. He just dribbles it into the corner. He almost stepped out. I don't know if you saw the picture. He was literally a couple inches away from stepping out, which would have been a really bad way to end the game because they wouldn't have even gotten a shot. And then he pulls up with a contested mid-range jump shot, which the only reason he got any space is because he made a decent crossover move. But he hadn't really been like dominating that game offensively, so it's not really a call.
I think he finished with 9 points.
Yeah, it was not really a call that you would expect on your last possession of the game, but obviously he gets it up there, and that's probably the biggest shot he's ever going to hit in his life, I would assume.
Definitely. And an interesting note about that final play was I remember Florida Atlantic, they missed, I think, a floater or a runner in the lane, and San Diego State gets the rebound. There's still 10 seconds left on the clock, and they had a timeout. And they decided not to use it. I mean, obviously it paid off for them in the end because they won, but thought it was interesting that they didn't use it. And then they kind of go off script. Butler kind of brings the ball down. He's kind of in no man's land over in that short corner area. And then, like you said, he took a contested jumper and knocked it down. But where did you see FAU go wrong in this game? Because I thought they just, I don't know, weren't sharp. I mean, with the shot making, it's one thing, but I don't know. I just thought the boards, they were getting crushing the boards late in the game. And I don't know about the overall rebounding numbers, but I just thought they weren't really doing the little things well.
Well, from first glance, my first thought, just because I was rooting for FAU, was their offense just when I thought they really had a chance to kind of break it open, especially when San Diego State clawed back a little bit, but it was still at this point I think it was around 9 points. And this was in the second half. They just would make the dumbest offensive mistakes, whether it was turnovers, whether it was bad shot selection, whether it was, just guys not really moving. It was just their offense, I felt like got to a point where it became very stagnant. And I think it's worth asking, why is that? Well, we need to also highlight the fact San Diego State has a very good defense, and they should not be taken lightly. And I think that they have a lot to do with that. And you can't say, oh, San Diego State just was handed this game by FAU being horrible on offense, because that is not in any way the case. Do I think Florida Atlantic could have won? Absolutely. Do I think they probably should have won? Yes. Are they entirely responsible in some form for the poor offensive performance at the end of the game? Yes. I think in their minds, they're in Florida Atlantic's minds, they're like, okay, we could have played better on offense. But in San Diego State's mind, they're like, okay, that was the elite defense that we expect ourselves to play with. So it's like not really a super surprising scenario. At the end of the day, it was an amazing shot that got San Diego State over the hump. And it was just a kind of bad luck situation for FAU. I mean, sure, there's plenty of things we can point to here and say, oh, if they had done this or they done that, they would have won. And yeah, that's all true. But at the end of the day, the guy made a great shot. It was like a 2 that was running down. It's the Final Four, biggest game that almost anybody on that court has played up until that point. I think that's 100% the truth. It's definitely the biggest game. And he hit the shot of his life. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And going back to your point about the San Diego State defense, early on, FAU I thought was picking them apart because they were just moving it side to side. They were really moving the ball around well. And I thought that was creating a lot of shots for a lot of different people. But I think as the game went along, I think San Diego State kind of just took it to them. And I thought FAU really wasn't moving the ball as much as they were in the first half. But even in the game itself, FAU only had 6 assists and San Diego State only had 8 assists. So it's not like either team was really moving the ball too well. But I just thought when it mattered most, I thought San Diego State's defense really came up big, and they got a lot of stops in a row too. And they gave their offense a chance, and they cashed in.
Yeah, and ultimately, at the end of the game, sometimes it comes down to who's making them and who's missing them. And FAU just went cold at literally the worst time possible.
Yeah, and the other thing too for FAU, they only had 2 players in double figures. I mean, the one guy, Martin, he went off for 26 and Boyd at 12, but didn't really get much help otherwise.
But also, too,
same for San Diego State, too. They only had 2 players in double figures.
But I thought this was a game, like if you told FAU, hey, you're going to get in the 70s against San Diego State, I think they would feel pretty happy about that, right?
Yeah, because, I feel like you would probably win the game with stopping.
Yeah, like let's look at San Diego State's prior games coming into this. Okay, they gave up 64 to Alabama, so you put up more than Alabama. Oh, they gave up 56 to Creighton. Okay, so you did a lot better. And by the way, San Diego State in the Alabama game ended up putting up 71. They put up 67 in that Creighton game. I mean, up until that point, that was the most amount of points that San Diego State had given up all tournament.
Yeah.
Against FAU.
Yeah, it's definitely not like them to give up a point total in the 70s.
So the point is for FAU, it's like you almost did what your goal was. You probably thought if you won 70, if you got to 70 first, you would have won, right? If you were the first to 70, you definitely would have had a really good chance, which is brutal for them because, it's really tough when you do some things well and you still can't even get the win at the end of the day. Just brutal, but it's still a historic run for FAU. Nothing to be ashamed of as a mid-major making it to the Final Four and losing on the last shot. And the same thing could be said for San Diego State. Regardless of what happens tonight, this has been an amazing run. I don't think we saw either of these two teams being Final Four contenders coming into the tournament.
Oh, definitely not. And it's definitely a great run for FAU to look back on. And now that they're going to be going to the American next year, they're definitely going to be putting themselves on the map. So they're definitely going to be.
Wait, FAU's going to where?
Apparently they're going to the American.
They're going to the American.
That's what someone said.
Are you sure?
I don't know. I have to fact check that.
I was going to say, I don't think they're going to the American. I'm.
Oh, it says they are going to the American.
They are?
Someone did tell me, and I just took their word for it.
New news?
Apparently, it came out June 10th of last year.
That is very under the radar. So I guess because the American has lost Cincinnati and Houston, they got to make up for it in some way now.
Makes sense.
Yeah, those are probably their 2 biggest schools, I'd say, besides, especially Houston and Cincinnati. Yeah.
It's
So
going to be a jump up for sure for FAU.
massive jump up, but hopefully they kind of find a way to, I guess, really start building their basketball program. It's still a very small school, so it's a massive jump for them, but we'll see how they do.
Yeah, and I think they still have a pretty young roster. So I mean, if they bring a lot of these guys back, I mean, they could still be pretty good.
Yeah, that's the hope. But the one thing is, you got to worry, of course, about the transfer portal, especially because it is a mid-major. But they're going to be making that jump, so hopefully that's a reason that guys will stay. And it seems like they have a good thing going. I wouldn't be surprised though if the coach ends up leaving, right?
Yeah, he might be lured away.
Yeah, he might be lured away. And it seems like he did a really good job this year, obviously. But it seems like particularly in the tournament, he did a really good job of, pointing the Owls in the right direction, especially when you consider that March Madness is such a matchups-based game, especially more than other games of basketball, but especially in the tournament, we see that. And I thought he did a really good job as the head coach.
Yeah, I think his name is Dusty May.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did a really good job. I mean, no one saw FAU, let alone making the Final Four. I mean, some people could pick them to win one game, maybe two games, but to go all the way to the Final Four, it was definitely out of nowhere. But great run for them. And then San Diego State, they move on to play tonight in the national championship. But their opponent was going to be decided between Miami and UConn, which was the second game of the Final Four on Saturday night. And UConn came out and they were tested a little bit early, and then they found a way to pull away and they won 72-59. Jimmy, what was your takeaway? How did UConn get this win?
Defense. They held Miami under 60 points. That's how. They threw Miami very much so off their game. And I felt like Miami just could never, ever get like super close. And that was the one thing that UConn always made sure to do. And it's because they're so good on both ends of the floor that they can always put themselves in a position where they can do that. Miami, we've watched them put up a lot of points in some of their other games. We saw the terrific second half comeback they had against Texas. I mean, this is a team that could score, and they absolutely shut them down. 59 points is nothing. Nothing. You don't even put up 60 or 40 minutes.
Especially for an offensive of their caliber.
Absolutely. And they put up 35 in the second half, but really the damage was done in the first half when you think about it, because they only gave up 24.
Yeah. And they got themselves in a little bit of a hole. So obviously
it was 13 at halftime.
Yeah.
And then they both scored 35 in the second half.
That's why I picked UConn. It's just I thought they were just better on both sides of the ball, specifically the defensive side. I thought that was the main reason, and it showed. And credit to Adama Sanogo, too, for UConn. He had a very nice game with 21 points and 10 rebounds. And he didn't get too much help. I mean, Jordan Hawkins at 13 points, but I don't know. I feel like going forward, like Sanogo's got to be the guy for UConn, especially tonight. But I think in terms of this game, you're right. Miami kind of just dug themselves into a hole, and then they couldn't really get anything going. You were trying to see if they could make maybe a run in the second half, and it just never happened.
Yeah, and UConn does like a lot of the little things, right? Like they take smart shots. They really have good offensive possessions. They do a pretty good job, I think, of not getting too caught up on the three ball and making sure they get good shots, particularly down low with their big guys. And they also do a great job of hitting the glass offensively.
I was about to bring that up.
That's really, I think,
crushed Miami in the glass.
The biggest advantage that they hold, particularly when it comes to the glass. And they do such a good job on really both ends of the floor. But it's such an advantage that you have when you're, doing a great job of rebounding. And Sanogo gives them that. And honestly, I would say Sanogo has really stood out to me this tournament by far. Like among all the players, I've been so impressed with his ability on the boards. And the one thing, too, I will say about UConn is they don't really have like this like one dominant player. It just is like an all-around really good team.
Yeah, and it's funny because coming into the year, Sanogo was probably the closest thing they had to a dominant player. But in the tournament, it's kind of been Hawkins. Hawkins has kind of came out of nowhere and been the sharpshooter. But you're right, they don't really have a main go-to guy. I think Sanogo is probably that, if you had to answer the question. But yeah, there's not really a superstar. Sanogo's close to a superstar. Yeah, he could be a superstar. But the other thing, too, is they had 19 assists. I thought you brought up the passing earlier. I mean, they were really whipping it around and kind of catching Miami off guard. And I think that bodes them well, especially going into tonight when you're going to have to do that against a elite defensive team like San Diego State.
Yeah, but my biggest question for tonight's game, and let's get into that now, is how does San Diego State score? Because their offense is just not good enough. Like they're going to have to find some form of offense. And I don't know where that's going to come from because I don't think FAU is nearly, and I would say this about a lot of the teams that they played, Creighton too, Alabama as well. None of those teams I think are on the defensive level of UConn.
No, I don't think so either. I agree. I think for San Diego State, they have to get Matt Bradley going. I mean, he's probably where you start. I mean, he took a lot of shots in their game against FAU, and he was pretty efficient, but I think he's the guy that you kind of have to give the ball to. I mean, if there's a desperate play where you're kind of running down the shot clock, I feel like he's got to have the ball. But yeah, it's gonna be tough to score, especially inside. And I was gonna bring this up a few minutes ago. When Sanogo goes out of the game, they still have Donovan Clingan, who's a 7-2 center. He's the backup. I mean, so there's still rim protection in there. It's gonna be tough to score inside with Sanogo or Clingan in there. They're gonna have to make a lot of shots. They're just gonna have to probably live or die by outside shots. And if they get inside, they could maybe swing it back out, and someone might be open.
And another thing, these teams are kind of very similar where they have that defensive focus. But I think UConn is just, you can't even call it fighting fire with fire. Like, you can't just say, oh, San Diego State's going to need to be an elite defensive team. They already can be and might still lose this game just because, number one, they don't have nearly as good an offense as UConn does a defense. And the gap between those two is so large. And then also my second question is like, I could see UConn being able to score on the San Diego State defense. Like I can. Like if FAU put up 71, sure as heck think UConn can do it.
Yeah, if Jordan Hawkins and the other shooters kind of get back to what they were doing earlier in the tournament, but I think that's the key too. They can shoot right over the defense. I mean, they can just dump into the Sanogo too. They have a lot of options. It's funny because we were talking about the Miami UConn game last week. I thought the reason why UConn would win is because they were better defensively. Tonight, I think offensively is going to be the reason why.
Yeah.
I just think they have more shot makers.
They definitely have more shot makers. It's not even a thought in my head. I totally agree with that. I think the biggest thing, if San Diego State is really going to find a way to win this game, what opportunity do they have? You think it's outside shots? I don't know. They would probably have to hit a really large amount of threes.
I don't think that's what they're going to do right away. That's kind of a last resort if they're down like 10 or 15.
If they're down 10, they probably aren't coming back.
With like 10 minutes left. But
because I don't know. UConn seems like they are that good.
Maybe they try to go inside and get Sanogo in foul trouble early.
That's true.
Give them 2 fouls early on, get them on the bench.
That's true. That is probably their best possible approach. But this UConn team has just looked so untested by everybody. I've been waiting for them to like have a close game that they are like kind of surprised by, and then they ultimately kind of lose. But at the same time, I just don't see a way that. Oh, sorry, we got a school alert here. That's why my phone's going on.
Same with me.
Yeah, great. Now we got a stalker around here. I guess that's what's going on. So the problems never end. Anyway, back to UConn here. I like their whole offensive scheme, and I just don't see any chance that San Diego State's going to have. And I like their defensive scheme too. I just don't see a way that like San Diego State can really like play with these guys. That's ultimately my biggest concern.
Yeah, you're 100% right. UConn has been completely unfazed by everyone in the tournament. Now, San Diego State is going to present a challenge, I would assume, on the defensive side for San Diego State, offensively for UConn. But yeah, like you said, it's just every time they go out there, they play their game, and it's almost like teams have to adjust to how they play, and they haven't really had to adjust to how other teams play. So I think early on, for the first couple of minutes, maybe even the first half, I think San Diego State's going to come out and they're going to try to, I don't know, really hang their hat on defense and try to force UConn into some tough shots and contested shots too. And then for San Diego State, if they can just, I don't know, tread water offensively and their defense kind of just holds true and plays to the caliber that they have been all year and all tournament, I think that will give themselves a chance. But I wanted to ask you, maybe to wrap this little segment up, who do you like? Because San Diego State has a really good defense, and UConn is kind of solid on both ends, but they have been known for their offense, especially in this tournament. So who do you like? Do you like San Diego State or do you like UConn?
Well, everyone in the world's going to pick UConn, and it's hard not to, right? It's really hard not to with the way that they've played throughout the tournament. But I'm going to hope for a San Diego State miracle, so I guess I'll pick them for the fun of it, and just hope that I'm right here. How about yourself?
I mean, as a casual fan, I just hope it's very close because the spread's 7, so that's kind of a signifier that I don't know, UConn could win this game comfortably. But at the end of the day, I do think UConn wins just because I trust them more on the offensive end, and I just think they have more shot makers than San Diego State. So I'll take the offense here. I'll take UConn. I think they're going to win tonight, and they're going to win another title once again. I
Yeah.
think they're going to get it done. And one of these coaches is going to get their first championship. I don't remember the San Diego State coach's name. I should probably try to find out who that is. But Dan Hurley is the UConn head coach, and he's been around. So it would be nice for him to get a title. But for San Diego State, for them to come in as a 5 seed and get it done, and UConn's a 4 seed, but I think San Diego State winning would be way more surprising. Brian Dutcher, that's the San Diego State coach. I mean, for him to get a title for not just San Diego State, but for the Mountain West, I mean, that would be crazy. So I'll go with UConn, but I just hope it's a good one tonight. And also, I'm not sure if you knew this going into March Madness, but this was Jim Nance's last March Madness tournament. So tonight will be his last March Madness game that he'll ever call, which is unfortunate. So we'll have to bid farewell to Jim Nance tonight. So hope to send him off in a nice way. So let's get into some lacrosse.
Yeah, let's get into some
lacrosse. I haven't talked about it in a little while, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. The Loyola men's and women's lacrosse teams, they were in action on Saturday. They both faced off against Holy Cross, both home games. The women's team, they were in pretty much cruise control throughout the whole way. They won 21-7, or actually, excuse me, 20-7. And the men's team, they found a way to overcome a kind of difficult first half where they were only up 6-5 at the half, but they ended up pulling away and winning 15-8. Jimmy, I'm not sure if you've caught the games recently in the last week or so, but I don't know. What have you seen from the lacrosse teams that have made you excited, and what are some things that you think we can still work on?
Well, I think the first thing that we can absolutely point to as a strong suit of our team is our offense. We've been scoring. We've been doing a really good job of scoring. We had an awesome second half, I thought, against Holy Cross that really kind of propelled us. And you kind of combine with the great offense with the defense stepping up. That's really when I think we're at our best. Obviously, we still have a lot of season left because we got to finish up Patriot League play well. And then we ultimately are like, I'm under the belief that we got to win the conference tournament or at least get to the final, right? Because that's just kind of like the standard that we have, number one. And number two, you don't want to leave it up to chance when it comes to getting into the tournament. You want to win your conference. We are not expected necessarily to win our conference, but let's just say we have a strong chance, right? Like there's a chance that we can. I really think there's only 3 teams that can. I would think it's probably Army, us, and then maybe BU.
Yeah,
those are the top 3 teams. Besides that, and our Army, they had our number.
Yeah, we played them a couple weeks ago up there at West Point, and they gave it to us.
And they play really well at home too.
Yeah, and so do the Greyhounds. I mean, they play really well at home too. So I think you're 100% right. Getting the Patriot League tournament win is going to be huge because you don't want to leave it up to the committee to make them determine whether we should get an at-large bid or not. And considering that there's a couple of other conferences that are very deep this year, most notably, I think it's the Big Ten and the ACC. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's what it is. Those 2 conferences are very deep this year. So you really don't want the committee to say, oh, is Loyola an at-large team that deserves to get in? I think you need to do whatever it takes to win the Patriot League tournament. And if we somehow get the 1 seed in the Patriot League tournament, that would be huge hosting the games here because that would be a much better advantage to have rather than going up to Army, for example.
Absolutely. And that's what we want. That's why we got to close out Patriot League play strong.
Yeah. And we have been wrapping off some wins recently. I mean, we've pretty much beaten everyone that we have been expected to beat. I mean, we've had some tough losses in there. I mean, the Rutgers loss was whatever. It's a first road game. And then the Duke one was probably the most concerning just because we weren't very competitive in the game. But yeah, Duke is now the number 1 team.
That was kind of a stinker. That's the thing.
And then the Army loss was the 3rd loss.
And we know we can play against high-level teams. I mean, we've played against Maryland super well. We've played against teams like Hopkins. Obviously, we know that we can compete against, upper-level competition.
Right, and both of those teams are in the top 6 in this week's polls. I mean, those wins are looking very, very good right now.
Exactly. So I know that clunker against Duke is very concerning. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to be a game that we ultimately just find a way to move on from. And there's still a lot to be written for this season. And I think it starts obviously winning these Patriot League games. Like Holy Cross, defeating them, yes, that's what you need. You need to have a 15-11 victory like that. You need to make sure that you take care of business, especially on your home turf, especially in a conference game. So that's a good first step. But now we have a game against Navy. It's going to be on Friday. It's going to be on CBS Sports Network. So everyone's going to be home and you should be able to watch it on Good Friday. Hopefully everyone's cheering up the team. I'll definitely be tuning in. I believe it's a night game too. So that's also exciting. But I think it just continues with getting another conference win there and then moving on to the next step, right? Which is what we want to see. Also, I think it's worth noting the women have been doing well too.
Yeah, they continue to hum along. I believe they're now number 11 in the rankings. I think they were dropped a little bit, but I'm not exactly sure why. They had a great year so far. I mean, they just score a lot of goals. They have so many different weapons on offense, and recently it's been Jillian Wilson, Chase Boyle, and company. They just find a way to score, and they kind of just do it in flurries. I mean, there's some times where they'll go in a little funk, but there's other times where they can just flick the light switch and they can just rip off goal after goal after goal after goal, and they can really turn it on. But they had some key conference wins last week. They beat American 19-7, and then they beat Holy Cross, like I mentioned earlier, 20-7. And they go to Colgate next Saturday. So they just got to continue to hum along.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the focus for the Patriot League or for the women's team. And obviously for them too, I think despite their high ranking, they have to win the Patriot League tournament because there's not really any other teams that are in there. And if they lose, you could hypothetically put yourself in a situation where you might not get it just because the rest of the conference is looked upon. So I don't want to say negatively. It's just they're not really on the level that Loyola is, any of the other teams. But we just played a game against Syracuse in which they were a top team. They came here. We lost by a very slim margin. And it was kind of our first battle that we've had in a while. But you'd like to see the team still kind of like testing itself mid-season, you know? Like even though they're in conference play, they're scheduling these harder games. And I think it's going to better the team in the long run, especially if they make the tournament, because we always win. We always seem to win the Patriot League. We always seem to have a pretty decent seed. Maybe usually we get lucky and win a game, try and see if we can win two. But I feel like we always run into these big teams and they're ultimately like these bigger schools. Like, of course, we had Boston College last year. And it's just those big games against those bigger teams where we weren't necessarily challenged all season. We seem to kind of show up, not necessarily flat, but we just looked at times a little overmatched.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like we do a good job of testing ourselves during the regular season. I mean, we've played,
Particularly the men's and the women's have done a pretty good job of scheduling it.
yeah, every year I feel like the non-conference schedule for both the men's and the women's teams are very strong. I'm looking at the women's one right now. I mean, we've played Johns Hopkins, Penn, Florida, and Syracuse, and we've gone 2-2 in those games, and the losses have been very competitive, 14-11 and 9-7 to Florida and Syracuse. But the wins were nice, 12-10 over Hopkins and 15-7 over Penn. And then on the men's side, we've tested ourselves by playing Maryland and Johns Hopkins, who we mentioned earlier. We beat both of them at home. Took a tough loss on the road to Rutgers and another one on the road to Duke. And we have another non-conference game coming up for the men in a few weeks when we host Georgetown. That's going to be a huge game because Georgetown has kind of revived themselves after a tough start, and they're definitely a dangerous team if they get into the tournament. So, yeah, for both the men's and women's teams, I think if they can just handle their business in the conference and get as many conference wins as they can and improve their positioning going to the conference tournaments, I think that's number one. And then number two, when you have the chance to play non-conference teams who are kind of on the map, I would say more so than Loyola, just because some of these schools are much bigger than Loyola. I think if you can go into those games and have a sense that you can win and then even pull off a win, I mean, that would go a long way, especially if you get in the tournament when you're kind of playing whoever the committee decides to put you against. So, yeah, I think going forward, they just got to, I don't know, just gain some internal confidence.
Absolutely.
Kind of stick to the game plan.
Stick to the game plan. That's absolutely it. Ready for a quick break?
Yeah, we'll take a quick break here on After the Whistle. We will come back from the break. We'll talk about our takeaways from the opening weekend of the MLB season. So stay tuned. We will be right back. Welcome back to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bazzi and Jimmy Cody. We're back and we're now going to talk about some MLB. And Jimmy, the season started on Thursday, as we both know. And we'll just talk about, I guess, both of our teams to start, but we could go to a general sense as well. For your New York Yankees, they took 2 out of 3 from the San Francisco Giants. I mean, that's got to be like a pretty decent start. But what did you see from the Yankees? Obviously, Anthony Volpe is stealing the headlines too with his debut and all of that. So, what did you see from the Yankees from your opening series against the Giants?
Well, I was happy with the pitching just because we put up 2 shutouts, which I can't really remember I think that's the first time in the opening series we've ever done that in like Yankees history, which you think about Yankees history. I mean, that's a big deal. Like, it's not like it's Pirates history here. Not, no offense to the Pirates, maybe like Marlins history. That's maybe a little more appropriate because the Pirates still have some good baseball history. But point is, it's impressive. Obviously, Garrett Cole put together a really good start, had 11 Ks. I can't ask for much more than that from Garrett Cole. I just hope that he can keep that high level of play going throughout the rest of the season. And I especially hope he finds a way to do that to the Toronto Blue Jays, who just seem to give us misfits, especially when they go up against Garrett Cole. So good start. I liked what the bullpen gave us as well, because I thought we were able to use a good collection of like younger guys, back end guys, especially in the third game, because we were out to such a nice lead and we got such a good start from our new guy, Brito, who started the third game. I was really impressed with him. I mean, he's really new. Like, I think this is definitely his first season he's ever been in the bigs. Now he's in our rotation due to the injuries we have. So it is what it is as far as that goes, because we have no choice but to put him out there. But if he's playing well, it's just another arm to add to our arsenal, and I think that's a positive.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy so far with how we've been going. I mean, the bats have been good. We've never put anything less up. I mean, we won the first game, put a decent amount of runs up in the second game. It's just that we kind of got a bad start out of Schmidt and wasn't ideal. But third game, put up 6 runs. Guys are hitting homers. Obviously, Judge is having a great start. Volpe's been a really nice addition on the base paths. I've been really excited by him. Rizzo's been good. Even Josh Donaldson's hit a home run, which has been nice because, usually he's an absolute bum, especially in Yankee. The thing is, most Yankee fans, I think if you asked them about Josh Donaldson before he came to the team, they'd probably say, oh, he was like one of the most hated players just because he killed us throughout the entirety of his career. But now that he's on our team, I think it's so funny because we have no choice but to root for him, but he's not playing good enough. So it's kind of like the same role. We still have no choice but to hate him. What have you been thinking about the Phillies so far?
Well, before I get into that, I actually had some Yankee insights because I was watching actually some of the action from each of the 3 games.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was impressed with the strikeouts from the pitching. I just every time I come back to the couch to watch, it seems like every pitcher would just strike. Like Cole had 11 Ks, like you said, and I think Clark Schmidt, I think, had 5, and then Brito had 6, and then I was impressed too. And I know you guys historically, at least in our lifetime, the last few years, have had a great bullpen. And Marinaccio came in, struck out the side. Like, I was impressed. Like, this is another guy that I've never heard of, and he's probably going to be another key clog in the bullpen.
He was solid last year. You know what his problem was? Is like they would put him in for like a little bit longer relief, as opposed to like just going out there, getting the outs, and asking him to. That's it. And I always feel like that was kind of unfair to him because he was like in that tween spot. And sometimes some outs are more difficult to get than others, right? And especially when you have to go out there for another inning as a reliever, that can be tough. So I thought, as a younger guy, he was asked to do a lot that last year. But so far, from what I've seen from him this year, in all his appearances, he's been very effective, and I can't ask for much more. So yes, I do like Rob Marinaccio a lot. We have plenty of other guys. We got Michael King. We have Clay Holmes. We have Michael King. We have Lou Trevino is going to be coming back. He was a good addition for us. And then we also have Tommy Kahnle coming back eventually in May. Both those guys should be back. So that's a pretty loaded pen when you really consider it.
A lot of weapons. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was a notable thing that
I would say that probably.
And I know I'm coming from a casual perspective.
No. The bullpen is good. Like, it's a really good bullpen. Like, I will say the one thing that the Yankees always have that's good is a good bullpen.
I mean, that will definitely bode you well, not just throughout the year, but going into October, assuming that you would get there. But Now I'll answer your question about the Phillies. And for us, it was a rough weekend. We got swept down in Texas by the Rangers. And the offense was there Thursday and Saturday. I think Thursday we had 7 runs. Saturday only 3, but it's all about the pitching. I think it's very concerning when you have top starters like Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, and they go out there and get absolutely shelled. And I'm not going to overreact too much just because we've only played 3 games. I mean, there's still 159 games left, but I don't know, to lose like that. I mean, 16-3 on Saturday, that's tough. 11-7 Thursday, that was more so just kind of an implosion from Nola and Gregory Soto, who is our newest bullpen addition. I think that's just a tough way to open the year. But last night was just tough because you have Bailey Falter start, and he is not supposed to be in the rotation. He's supposed to be out of the bullpen, and he's filling in for Ranger Suarez, who is currently on the injured list, I believe. And he goes out there and pitches very well, and you still lose 2-1. But I don't know. I just think for the Phils, they just have to get 1 win to kind of just jumpstart the season. And I'm not sure if the first series was kind of like this. Some people are saying it's like a World Series hangover. I don't know. It's like hard to
I think you guys
explain
have
and
a couple
describe.
different things.
And my other thing too was, listen, we played
It's
a
not the
lot
same
of,
team though.
it's not the same team. There's a lot of key guys from the team last year that are back just because they're under contract and whatnot. But I know Harper's not there, but we also didn't have Harper last year for like several months. I'm not sure if that has to do with anything with it. And listen, this year's different with the Hoskins injury. He's out for the year. I'm not sure if missing him is like a huge deal. It's definitely like somewhat of a deal.
Well, those are two of the better bats in your lineup. You can't ignore their absence.
Right. And I think the key, at least for this first series, and I know it's only one series, but I just think you need to get more contributions from guys in the middle. I mean, you need more from Yomuto and Castellanos and like Bryson Stott and them, because you would think Alec Boehm is going to show up, and Kyle Schwarber. You can say what you want about the batting average, like it's always going to be around 200, but like you got to get home runs at him because that's really what his value is.
I think Castellanos needs to be a
I
little
think
bit.
he's the guy.
He's got to be talked
He was
about.
very subpar last year.
He was extremely subpar last year.
He had like
not a good defense.
Only like 3 or 4 timely hits, which were timely, and he actually had really good defensive plays in the postseason. But for what we're paying him, he hasn't lived up to it yet.
But he's made some plays this year that even he's looked a little bit lost on the defensive end, right? Like he has not looked great out there. And it's kind of like a known concern with him. It's just that the Phillies, when you look at the situation that they have, they're unfortunately going to be in this situation where somebody's going to have to be in the outfield between him, Schwarber, eventually Bryce Harper. Like it's going to happen, right?
Right. And then in center field, Brandon Marsh kind of answered that question, who would play center field. It's going to be him and probably Christian Pache, who we just traded for. But I didn't even mention Trey Turner, who was the big pickup. He's been pretty good so far. I mean, he's at 385 through the first 3 games. So, I mean, there's no complaints there. But I think the other dilemma, too, and this goes back to the Hoskins injury, I think Derek Hall will probably play first base most days. And his problem is he can't really hit lefties, and he's a left-handed hitter.
Oof.
But you also have Edmundo Sosa, who had an awesome spring training, and he's a righty, and he came in last night. He went 2 for 4, so he's kind of just continuing where he left off in the spring. So I think the question is, like, do you go with Sosa or
it's going to have to
Hall?
Be a platoon situation.
And the thing is, Sosa doesn't really play first base, so you probably move Bohm to first base. It's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that it was one or the other at first base. So, I mean, do you want to ask Bohm to move, though? Because you already know that Bohm isn't the best defender, right? And do you want him to, in his, I don't want to say young career, but, he's still on the up. Do you really want to take him out of his role at third base, especially when he's been playing okay? That's another question that you got to ask. It seems like, honestly, like the Phillies are going to have to look for an answer as far as first base goes for the rest of this year. And I don't want to say this now, but it seems like they're going to have to look for somebody to trade for eventually.
That's what I'm thinking too. And we'll see if the Phillies are still in the mix at the deadline. I mean, I would hope they would be just based on who they have and what they did last year. But I would assume that they would try to look for a first baseman or someone that can kind of play a first base or other utility role in the infield. It's just tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And especially when you have injuries, because that puts you in a situation where it's not that you didn't have the guys. It's you have the guys and they just simply can't be there. Because think about it, if you added Trey Turner's to the World Series team of last year, you're saying, oh, this is a great team. Like, this is awesome. But it's not the same team because you don't have Bryce Harper. You're missing some guys in the rotation. You're missing, obviously, Hoskins due to his injury. And also, it's a new year. So That's the thing as well. That's a thing, or that's another part of it. But you know what else the Phillies had last year, particularly in the playoffs, that they don't have now? They were on a hot streak. They looked great in the playoffs. They got hot at the right time. And I would encourage some caution with this team just because I felt like I remember watching them last year and they didn't start the season off very good last year either. And then they kind of, I don't want to say rounded into form, but I felt like ever since you and I went to that game in mid-May, like that was really when they kind of around May, around the beginning of the summer, they started playing a little bit better, and that kind of coincided with Rob Thompson becoming the coach in the summer, and that really was what kind of I thought got them going.
Yeah, and it's not like the Phillies are a juggernaut regular season team. They won 87 games, which isn't bad. I mean, that's a decent amount of wins.
So winning record.
It's not like you're winning 100 games like the Braves.
It's not 90 either.
It's not 90 either, but yeah, I just think they have to tread water. They got to find something going because, like you said, it's not the same team, but there's a lot of guys from last year that you would think would try to replicate what they did. But I agree with Nick Castellanos 100%. He needs to step up.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's the main guy. But in general, I mean, do you have any takeaways from the opening weekend? Because obviously the pitch clock has probably been the main story, and that has nothing to do with the teams.
It's been great.
But I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the
2 hours, 3 minutes yesterday.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was going to say the average game time, I think, so far is 2 hours and 38 minutes. That's phenomenal.
No, it's phenomenal. You can't ask for much more. And I think that's a great way to get more people into baseball.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'll take the Mets-Marlins game on Friday, for example. 6:40 first pitch. I'm watching a few innings just because I have a roommate who's a Mets fan. And then on and off I'm watching. But I go back out to the couch. It's like 9 o'clock. All of a sudden, it's like bottom 9. I'm like, oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah, it is great.
I'm really looking forward to it. It honestly is going to get so many younger people to watch. Because I think a lot of people like baseball, but sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to fit it in the schedule just because it's 3 hours. But now it's not 3 hours all the time.
It's not even that. It's just 3 hours. Sometimes it would be 3.5. Sometimes it'd be 3:45. Yeah, it's one thing when it's football and everybody really wants to see it. But if it's Tigers Rays on a Tuesday afternoon, like it just, I don't know. It's a tough watch sometimes, and it makes it really hard.
I think the other two with the pitch clock is the fact that the pitchers and the batters too. I mean, there's only going to be 15 seconds in between pitches. I think that's big for the viewers too, because it's not like you can watch a pitch and then check your phone and then, I don't know, you could miss a home run or something. You're going to be constantly looking at the TV. It's going to get the viewership to go up.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we literally saw side by sides where we'd have a whole at bat done, multi pitches. And then last year was the same span where 2 or 3 pitches were thrown.
Yeah.
So that's the timing is the first aspect for sure that has improved. I think also too, it's helped improve the offense because we've seen stealing become a lot more part of the game than it was. Particularly the steals have been very successful. I'm pretty sure on the first day, like I don't remember what the percentage was, but it was extremely high. And it's awesome because I think that's an element to the game which we haven't seen in a while. And you know, I think most people kind of consider baseball to be like this quote unquote lazy sport, right? There's definitely some guys who half it out there to say the least. But now when you put this new emphasis on speed, I think it's really cool. And it's kind of add a new element to the game that I think can get more fans involved and, you know, hopefully just gets more people into baseball either way. So I think there's been a lot of positives. I've been excited with the way that the games have been going. There's been some nice amounts of scoring. I think across all fronts. I think this is a win for baseball because I feel like it gives everyone kind of like an even playing field now.
Oh, definitely. And with the balanced schedule too, the fact that everyone plays everyone now, I mean, that's definitely a more balanced and fair effect to the game. So I love it so far, but I wanted to jump into the NFL. Speaking of a feature that's impacting the sport, there was a report that came out, I believe it was last week.
Yeah, the owners and executive meetings. Yes.
Yeah, and it's about flexing Thursday night football games. And the new proposal is that teams could play up to 2 Thursday night games next season. So how do you feel about that? Because we've heard people such as Patrick Mahomes and John Mara. John Mara, for those who don't know, is the owner of the New York Giants. They have not liked this proposal, but what do you think? Because I think it's interesting.
Okay, so I know this is a really crazy thought. I don't necessarily hate Thursday night football, the concept, the idea. But when you look at the games in general, they're usually not the best set of games, right? Like that's been a constant problem for years. I thought the schedule last year particularly was rough for Amazon. And you got to factor that into it too. It's like now you got to go watch on Amazon. It's not really on your TV. So it's like, All right, I'm making an Amazon commitment to putting this on here because, yeah, you can go watch another movie or show, but I think most people are still kind of going around on whatever cable or whatever they're using. So, you got to kind of put a little bit more effort into some of these games. And sometimes when they're not the most visible, it makes it less fun. So, for the NFL's point of view, they're like, all right, let's get better teams here. Let's flex the matchups that are the best. But my problem is if they're going to do that for Sunday night or for Thursday night football, we haven't even done that for Monday night football. We got to
Yeah,
do that for
there
Monday
hasn't
night
been
football.
also a single conversation about Monday night.
And
It's only
Monday
been about
night is a
Thursday night.
way bigger deal to most football fans. And that I think that includes us than Thursday night football is. If you hear that your team's playing on Thursday night football, I don't know about you. You know what I think? Oh my God, what a hassle.
Yeah,
It's
you're
a
looking.
pain.
I know.
It is such a pain.
It's that one day you're like, oh,
my
now
God,
we're here.
okay, it's a Thursday night
Not
game,
even on
I
cable
guess.
television.
Yeah, it's not. It's Thursday night football is a hassle to say the least. It's like, all right, I guess now it's the middle of the week. I guess you still got to go to work and school the next day if the team loses. Like, it's just a bad way to begin the weekend. I don't know. I'd prefer Monday night football
I
be
do
a
too.
flex opportunity longer before I think about Thursday night football. And again, I think the concept is good because you're trying to put more teams in a national spotlight. And I think that's overall good for the brand of football. But at the same time, we got to consider this. Like George Kittle came out and said, and this is one of the top tight ends in the league, how he thinks of an NFL game as going through multiple car accidents because he's just getting so beat up and it takes him so many days to recover. Like he's saying that he essentially needs, say it's a Sunday game, but it's on the East Coast. Okay, they fly back. Well, then he really only has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And he's saying how Tuesday is like the worst day. And then after that, it gets a little bit better. But every extra day after that is what he needs.
Yeah.
So when he only has one day in between that Tuesday, which is the roughest day, and Thursday, which is now game day, and you got to factor in the travel too, because Wednesday now becomes a travel day, we're not putting the best product on the field. So I don't think flexing on for Thursdays is ideally the best situation. Now, I'll tell you what, I think if the NFL, if they really wanted to make a commitment to like having another day that they could do football, don't do it Saturday because that's college football. Why not Friday?
And it's interesting you brought up Friday because Amazon, speaking of Amazon, they're having a Black Friday game this season.
They are.
2023. That's been confirmed. So that's been signed off on. So we'll see how that goes.
I wouldn't be surprised if that became like a thing.
I think it's not a bad move.
I think Friday, and I know most people, especially in small towns, are gonna be like, "Oh, that's high school," and I get that, but I think there's room for the NFL to certainly have a place on Friday nights. I don't think anybody's gonna tell the NFL no, and they're gonna get good ratings.
I think the only competition they have would be like NBA,
and that's not really competition for the NFL.
And like NHL is the only other thing on, but that's not like a huge deal.
I think that Amazon too. I understand what they're trying to do, but I think they got to do a better job of not necessarily marketing their product, but making it more accessible, I guess.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, especially if these matchups are not good again next year, and I'm really excited to see what these matchups end up being for Amazon for Thursday night, because if they're bad again like they are last year, and then the ratings also aren't great because the Amazon ratings were not good last year. Amazon did not, and you got to keep in mind the way it works is Amazon, CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN pay the NFL X amount of money to get that. Then they have to find a way to recuperate it, make profit from the ads. That's really where they make the money. But if nobody's watching, you're not going to make money off the ads.
I know.
So that's like they are in hot water essentially. And this is the first time that we've seen Amazon and kind of like the streaming verse kind of really get into sports. I mean, I know that Sunday NFL Sunday Ticket is now going to be on YouTube TV. I think that's good. I think that's a good start just because YouTube is a site that everyone's familiar with.
That brings up to your point about accessibility. That's definitely going to be easier to access. And even with Amazon, it's hard to access now. And it's just tricky because they try to make it easy because if your team is playing on Thursday Night Football, the game's free. Like they'll put it on like NBC or ABC.
Whatever. Oh yeah, the local team. Yeah.
But I don't know, if you want to watch the casual, like if I want to watch like Broncos like Texans or whatever on a Thursday night, Not saying that would be a matchup.
That might be a matchup for
It
Thursday
could be.
Night Football.
I know they do play each other.
Yeah, with the matchups that they've had, I'm sure that would be under consideration.
But it's just hard to watch on the phone, and you can't watch unless you have an account, unless you're in Houston or Denver in that example.
That's true. And again, I liked the concept of Thursday Night Football being on Fox and NBC and CBS when they did that. I mean, Fox ended up taking the
CBS one, right?
Yeah, because it was CBS half the season with NFL Network, and then they also switched to NBC later in the season. I don't know. They had like some whole weird thing.
And then
Fox took over and was like, we want to do this all. But they didn't do every matchup. But I still thought the games were better because there were some division games. And I don't know, it's just
cross conference.
Yeah, it's just a little bit cooler when it's on Fox, when I got to go out of my way to go watch, I don't know. I'm trying to think of some of the worst matchup I thought this year was the Cardinals Saints. It was a high scoring game, but like two teams that just weren't good this year. You would think, okay, this is an inter-conference game and there's some potential here, but I mean, even the Eagles played the Texans on Thursday Night Football. Nobody wanted to see the Texans get the snot beat out of them by the Eagles.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I think there's a little bit of bad luck involved too, just because some of the matchups on paper
is there bad? Well, I don't know, because the Eagles were predicted to be pretty good,
right.
And the Texans were.
I'm just saying, like
first pick.
When the schedule came out, I think there were a couple of Thursday night games where on paper you're thinking, all right, this is probably be a decent game. Like I thought
Bears Commanders.
No, not that one. I actually thought Colts Broncos would be a decent match. Like on paper coming in, like Colts were pretty good the year before. Broncos just got Russell Wilson. Like it's gonna be probably a decent game. It wasn't, but I just thought there were a lot of games where they just got screwed because the game would be like 15-10.
Yeah, that's true. But all in general, I thought
I agree. First matchup, ones were
Their first matchup was literally the best one. And then if you look later in the season,
they got off to a bang though. Chargers Chiefs a great win.
Yeah, if you want me to honestly rank the terms of the quality, Chargers Chiefs was number one. Going into the game at the time, Jets Jaguars was somewhat important.
Yeah, not
because
bad.
both of them were fighting, but it ended up being a Jets clown show, which is to be expected. And then the only other game I remember even being remotely close to important was the Packers and the Titans, because both were like somewhat fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, and then I'll bring up the Titans again. They were, and I was going to bring this up earlier. They actually played on Thursday Night Football twice because their other one was when they played the Cowboys, like week 17.
That's right, but they sat all their starters. Remember that?
Right, and they were starting, I think, Josh Dobbs, and they ended up losing that game and losing the division the following week. So,
yep. So
going forward, it's weird because I think if you're scheduling teams twice, hypothetically, let's say this proposal goes through. I think it's easy to schedule teams twice early in the season because there's not really any conflicting like Thursdays, just because September, October, there's not really much going on. The only exception is that the opening game of the season's on NBC, so they don't get that. Amazon doesn't get it. And then the other Thursday is Thanksgiving, and that's
I was gonna say
that's an exception.
They only get 14 weeks. Because there's none the week 17. They don't get it the first week, and they don't get it Thanksgiving.
Right. And then the tricky part is when you bring in the Saturdays later in the year, because the NFL does do game on Saturdays, like week 15, 16. And sometimes Christmas and New Year's kind of fall into place depending on the calendar.
Yeah. It's in December they do that.
Because if you have a team going like playing Saturday and then, I don't know.
Well, they'll leave a lot of them like open TBA. Like they do that for a lot of like
games,
especially some of them are in division.
And then they'll handpick them based on the matchup. But
Saturday's not a big deal.
Yeah,
that doesn't bother anybody. That's fine.
That's the schedule maker's job.
Yeah. That I don't think any fan is like, oh no, the game's getting moved up to Saturday.
Yeah. I just think for the teams though, it'd be weird if you're playing like Sunday, Saturday, Thursday.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know if they would ever do that.
But what's going to happen when you play on Monday to Sunday and then you're playing Thursday? You're playing essentially 3 games in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I'll take Thanksgiving for example. Last year, the Bills and the Patriots both played on Thanksgiving in separate games, but then they played each other the following Thursday. I mean, I don't think that's a big deal because that week would be like Sunday, Thursday, and then like a mini bye week. But there's so much to.
But you play
consideration.
3 games in a less than 3 week span.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Is that best for player safety?
Yeah, I don't know.
The NFL also is the same people saying, "Oh, we care about player safety."
I know. And they're probably banking on, oh, you get 10 days off after the second Thursday game.
Well, yeah, and I guess the statistics show that there's not more injuries on Thursday, but in general, I just think the product on Thursday is never equivalent to Sunday.
Yeah. I'll bring up another example. And I just thought of this because my roommate and I were talking about this in the fall. The Patriots, and this is about the Patriots, ironically, because I just brought them up. They played Thanksgiving night in Minnesota. They played the following Thursday at home against the Bills. And then they had a weird little gap in the schedule. They had a Monday night game the next week in Arizona, and then they had a Sunday game in Vegas. I mean, they went from like East Coast, then West Coast, West Coast. It's just
That's
weird.
a brutal
A weird little stretch.
Yeah, that's a very brutal.
There might be more of those though. If we get 2 Thursday games for every team, I mean, if that would be allowed, there's gonna be a lot.
Yeah,
happen.
Yeah, it's brutal. I'm really not a fan of Thursday night football flexing. I think maybe earlier in the season if that's something you want to do, but at the end of the day, I would rather see it like on a Friday or a Saturday, just because I feel like extra days is better.
Yeah. The other thing that hurts Amazon too is I think they try to get every team at least one Thursday game. Some probably don't get any because some might get Sunday night 2 or 3 times. I feel like they try to give the weaker teams a chance to be on primetime. Like I'll take the Texans. They had one primetime game last year. It was a Thursday. I just feel like they're not going to get many good matchups. They might get a few, but I feel like Sunday night's obviously going to
That
want
was
them.
the Jets' only national game.
Yeah, Monday night is going to get a pretty good slate. And I would think the 4:25 Fox and CBS slate would do well too.
Well, Sunday Night Football has just overtaken because that's just the easiest way of flexing.
Also, you get a lot of viewers on Sunday night because most people are probably at home getting ready for work the next morning.
Because the matchups are always good. We know usually it's a big game. It's the same thing with Monday Night Football. It's just like a tradition at this point. Whereas Thursday Night Football, like, I mean, I would have bet 50% of football fans like really don't care about Thursday night if their team. And these are the like if I bet if it was on ESPN, they'd probably watch. But the fact that it's on Amazon, you got to make an extra effort. Right?
Yeah, and then the whole accessibility talking point that's in the consideration.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going against Amazon's favor in this situation, and I think the NFL is going to have to adjust at some point. But I'm not particularly sure how they're going to do it with all the factors such as player safety and, among other things, just the quality of games in general.
Yeah, there's a lot to handle. We'll see if the proposal goes through. But
yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah, I know. I hope they kind of stay where they are. But is there anything else that you want to bring up on the show?
No, I'm good for today.
Yeah, I think we have a lot coming up. The Masters are this weekend. The NBA, NHL seasons are wrapping up. We have the playoffs on the horizon. There'll be a lot to talk about when we come back for the break. We will not have a show on Friday or Monday next week because of Easter break. We'll be back on, I believe it would be April 14th. So we will be back then. But thank you, as always, for listening and have a great rest of the week.